Dear Libra, before anything else happens today, pause for a second. Because there's a feeling you've been carrying, that quiet tension in your chest. The sense that something is about to surface. Something you can't smooth over this time. What if I told you this week isn't here to test you? It's here to balance the scales. Imagine this, a knock. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. And the question isn't who is at the door. It's how your body reacts when it happens. Does your breath tighten, or does something inside you finally relax? Libra, this isn't about fear. It's about truth returning to where it belongs. Justice is moving now, quietly, precisely, personally. If you feel this already, leave a comment and say, "I'm ready. Stay with me." Because what opens next changes everything. Libra, stay with me for a moment longer. I want you to picture this quietly. Not as something dramatic. Not as a scene from outside your life, but as something that belongs to you. There is a knock. And no, it doesn't come with sirens. It doesn't come with shouting. It doesn't even come loudly. It comes the way truth always does. Soft. Precise. Impossible to ignore once you feel it. You might notice it first in your body. A pause in your breath. A subtle tightening in your chest. Or maybe the opposite. A strange sense of relief you can't explain. Because deep down, Libra, you already know this knock isn't random. It's not punishment. It's not threat. It's consequence finding balance again. You've lived long enough carrying things that were never meant to stay unresolved. Conversations you smoothed over to keep peace. Decisions postponed because you wanted harmony more than honesty. Moments where you chose silence so the scales wouldn't tip. But silence has weight. And imbalance always remembers. So when this knock comes, it may arrive as a message you weren't expecting, a document, a call that interrupts your routine, a sentence spoken by someone close that lands heavier than it should. Or it may arrive without words at all. Just a knowing, a realization you can't unsee, a truth stepping forward, asking to be acknowledged. And here's the part I want you to hear clearly. This moment is not here to scare you. It's here because something in your life has been leaning too far to one side. And the universe quietly, patiently is restoring balance. Justice doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wears timing. Sometimes it wears clarity. Sometimes it wears the courage you didn't know you were ready to feel. Ask yourself gently now. When you imagine that knock, does your heart brace, or does it soften? Because relief often hides beneath fear. And freedom often begins where avoidance ends. You don't have to open the door all at once. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to defend your past. All that's being asked of you right now is presence. To stand where you are. To feel what's true. To stop negotiating with discomfort and let honesty breathe. Libra, this is the kind of moment that changes things quietly. Not through force, but through alignment. And as the scales begin to shift back into place, you may notice something else happening too. The noise fades. The confusion settles. And underneath it all, there's a steadiness returning to you. That's not coincidence. That's justice doing its work. So don't rush ahead yet. Don't try to name everything. Just stay here with this feeling. Because what comes next doesn't start with action. It starts with awareness. And once you see clearly, the rest unfolds naturally. Libra, listen closely now. Because the fact that you're here, right at this moment, is not an accident you can brush aside. I know you've questioned timing before, wondered why certain messages arrive when they do. Why some words seem to find you right when you're trying not to feel too much. But this isn't coincidence. This is convergence. There's a place where your inner world meets the wider design of things. A quiet crossing point. And that's where you're standing right now. You didn't come here because you were curious. You came because something inside you was ready to stop turning away. The universe isn't asking you to perform. It isn't asking you to prove anything. It's simply inviting you to stand upright and look clearly at what's been waiting. There's a deeper current moving beneath this moment. Slow, unavoidable, honest. Pluto has been working in the background, patiently pressing on the places you built long ago. Your sense of safety, your idea of home, the stories you inherited and the ones you never questioned out loud. And Mercury, retracing its steps, has been stirring old conversations back to the surface. Not to confuse you, but to return unfinished truth to your hands. You may feel it as memories rising without warning, a family pattern you suddenly see clearly, a realization about what you've been protecting and what it's been costing you. This isn't the past attacking you, it's the past asking to be integrated. Libra, you are someone who knows how to read the room. You've always sensed the undercurrents. You've felt the imbalance before anyone named it. And for a long time, you may have told yourself that patience was enough. That time alone would smooth the edges. That harmony could be maintained by letting certain truths stay quiet. But truth doesn't disappear when it's delayed, it simply gathers strength. And when it finally speaks, it doesn't come to shame you, it comes to free you. There's power in this moment. Not loud power, not forceful power. The kind of power that arrives when you stop negotiating with yourself. When you allow clarity to replace confusion. When you choose balance that includes you. You might notice a shift now, a sense that something is lining up internally. As if pieces that didn't quite fit are finally beginning to arrange themselves. That's not your imagination. That's alignment beginning to settle. This is a turning point, Libra. Not because everything changes overnight, but because you do. Because you're no longer willing to carry what isn't yours to hold. Because you're ready to meet truth, without softening it into something smaller. And as this awareness deepens, as you stay present with it, you'll notice the next layer quietly approaching. Not as pressure, but as understanding. What unfolds next doesn't rush in. It reveals itself gently, one realization at a time. So stay here with me. Stay grounded in this moment of recognition. Because once you see where you're standing, you begin to understand why everything ahead is about to make sense. Libra, take a breath with me here. Because I need you to hear this clearly, and I need you to hear it without fear. What's unfolding around you right now is not a verdict. It's not a punishment. It's not the universe pointing a finger. This is a summons. A quiet but undeniable call, asking you to return to what's true. You've lived a long time believing that keeping the peace meant holding things together at any cost. That staying calm meant staying silent. That balance could be preserved by absorbing what wasn't fair and carrying it gracefully. And for a while that worked. At least on the surface. But underneath, something began to tilt. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just enough for your spirit to feel it. Divine justice doesn't arrive with force. It doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It arrives as clarity. It removes the fog. It ends the guessing. It closes the space where confusion used to live. And that can feel unsettling at first. Because ambiguity can feel safer than truth you have to face. But listen to me now. What's shaking in your life is not here to break you apart. It's here to realign you. Think of an old building whose foundations settled unevenly over time. The walls start to crack. The floors no longer feel level. Not because the structure failed, but because the ground beneath it shifted. To repair it, you don't tear the whole thing down. You correct the base. That's what's happening for you. The parts of your life that feel unstable are being adjusted back into fairness. Not to erase your past, but to support your future. And yes, that process can move things. Conversations may change tone. Dynamics may shift. Truths that were softened for comfort may finally stand on their own. But none of this is meant to harm you. It's meant to give you back your footing. You are not being judged. You are being recalibrated. There's a difference. Judgment closes doors. Justice opens them. Justice restores balance where there was imbalance. It returns weight to what was overlooked. It gives voice to what was silenced. And Libra, you have been quiet for a long time in places where your truth deserved air. You've tried to make things work by minimizing yourself. By understanding everyone else first. By delaying your own needs so the scales wouldn't tip. But real balance includes you. What's happening now is not the end of something good. It's the end of something unfinished. A chapter that lingered too long without resolution. And as that chapter begins to close, you may feel moments of vulnerability. Moments where you wonder if standing in truth will cost you something. But here's what it actually gives you. Stability. respect, peace that doesn't require self-erasure. The ground beneath you is being leveled. Quietly. Precisely. So don't rush to fix anything yet. Don't scramble to explain. Don't apologize for clarity. Just notice what no longer feels negotiable. Because once the fog lifts, you don't need to force balance anymore. It happens naturally. And as this steadiness settles into you, another layer begins to reveal itself, not as disruption, but as understanding. That's where we're headed next. Libra, let's slow this down together. Because what's opening now doesn't come from the outside world first. It rises quietly from within you. You may have noticed it already, a feeling you couldn't quite name. An old memory brushing past your thoughts without asking permission. A reaction that surprised you because it felt stronger than the moment deserved. That's not weakness. That's depth resurfacing. Pluto has a way of moving like an underground tide. It doesn't announce itself. It shifts what's beneath the surface until the ground can no longer stay still. For you, Libra, that ground is emotional. It's personal. It's the part of you that learned early on how to smooth things over, how to stay agreeable, how to carry discomfort quietly so others could feel at ease. You didn't do this because you were dishonest. You did it because you cared. But caring without truth slowly turns into a kind of self-forgetting. Some of what's coming up now may feel old. Old sadness, old unfairness that was never named. Family dynamics that asked you to be the mediator, even when you were hurting too. You may find yourself remembering moments you thought you had already made peace with. And yet here they are. Not to reopen wounds, but to be acknowledged properly this time. Mercury moving backward doesn't pull the past in to punish you. It brings unfinished conversations back, so they can finally land somewhere real. Words you swallowed long ago may feel close to the surface now. Truths you edited for politeness may want their full shape. You might feel an urge to speak, or to write, or to sit quietly and finally admit something to yourself without correcting it. And here's the part I want you to hear gently. No one else hid this truth from you. You hid it from yourself, not out of fear, out of a desire to keep things balanced. But balance that costs you honesty is not balance. It's postponement. There's a difference. You're not being asked to confront anyone aggressively. You're not being pushed to make dramatic declarations. This is subtler than that. This is about letting yourself feel what you once decided was too inconvenient to feel. It might come as a quiet realization that something you tolerated wasn't fair, that a dynamic you defended wasn't healthy. That peace you preserved asked you to disappear just a little, and as that realization settles, you may notice a strange mix of emotions, tenderness, sadness, and beneath it all, a surprising sense of relief, because truth, once named, stops pressing from the inside. You don't have to judge yourself for what you did to survive. You did the best you could with what you knew at the time. This moment isn't about blame. It's about permission. Permission to stop carrying what no longer fits. Permission to let the scales rest evenly, without you holding them in place. As you allow this inner honesty to breathe, something begins to soften, not collapse, soften. And in that softness, clarity finds room to enter. You may start to see certain relationships differently, certain choices more clearly, not with anger, with understanding. This is the kind of awareness that changes how you move forward without forcing you to burn anything down. So don't rush this. Let it unfold at its own pace. Let the truth meet you where you are. Because once you stop hiding from yourself, what comes next feels far less heavy. And as this inner clarity settles, it quietly prepares you for the next realization, waiting just ahead. Libra, now that you're seeing what's been living under the surface, let's talk about how this can show up in the real world. Because sometimes the universe doesn't send lightning. It sends paperwork. It sends a notification that lands in your inbox like a stone dropped into still water. And when you're a Libra, someone who naturally wants things to be fair, clean, balanced, resolved, that kind of message can hit you in a very specific place. Not just your mind, your conscience. This is the kind of week where a simple envelope can feel heavy. where a call you almost ignore carries more meaning than the words inside it, where a routine conversation suddenly has a sharper edge because there's truth sitting underneath it. The knock we talked about may look very ordinary at first. A contract, a shared expense, a money issue that needs to be addressed, a responsibility that can't be postponed anymore. It could even be something tied to family, old obligations, a situation that was left unclear because it was easier to keep the peace than to ask for accountability. And Libra, you know this feeling. That moment when you realize you've been carrying more than your share, just to keep the scales from tipping. But the scales do not stay balanced when one person is always compensating. This is why divine justice is moving now. Not to accuse you, to protect you, because Jupiter and Pluto in tension can make things look shinier than they are. An offer that sounds generous, an opportunity that seems perfectly timed, a promise that feels like it could solve everything with one quick yes. But underneath the sparkle, there can be a hidden cost, a fine print, a subtle pressure, a decision that asks you to give away leverage before you understand what you're signing. And this is where your intuition becomes sacred. Not anxious intuition, not overthinking, that quiet inner signal that says something is slightly off even if you cannot prove it yet. This is not the week to rush. Not because you're afraid, because you're wise. If someone pushes you for an answer, watch that. If something requires you to decide immediately, pause. If a deal or an agreement depends on you being too polite to ask questions, that is your sign to slow down. Libra, you are allowed to take your time. You are allowed to read the fine print. You are allowed to say, I need a day, I need to think, I need clarity. That is not resistance. That is self-respect. And please hear this. People who are honest with you will not punish you for being careful. Only manipulation demands speed. This week asks you to choose the kind of balance that includes your future. The kind where your money is protected. Your name is protected. Your energy is protected. And if you've been the one who always tries to make things fair, even when it costs you, this is your moment to shift the equation. Not by fighting, by seeing, by trusting what your body knows, by letting your inner compass lead instead of your fear of disappointing someone. So stay close to that quiet knowing. Let it guide your pace. Because the moment you stop rushing to keep things smooth, you begin to notice something powerful. The truth gets clearer. The next step gets simpler. And the kind of balance you've been craving starts to feel possible. And that brings us gently into what comes next. Libra, there's something important settling in now. And it doesn't arrive as resistance. It arrives as permission. Permission to stop giving pieces of yourself away, just to keep everything calm. You've always known how to read the emotional temperature of a room. You sense where things might tip. You notice discomfort before anyone names it. And for a long time, you believed it was your role to step in quietly and smooth it over. To give a little more. To bend a little further. To carry what wasn't evenly distributed, so no one else would feel the strain. You did that out of love, out of empathy, out of a deep desire for peace. But here's the truth you're beginning to feel now. Peace that costs you your center is not peace. It's endurance. This week asks you to look at boundaries differently. Not as walls, not as punishment, but as balance restored. A boundary is not a rejection of love. It's a correction of imbalance. Think of a scale that's been held in place by one hand for too long. Eventually, the hand grows tired. The weight feels heavier, not because the load increased, but because it was never shared fairly. That's where you've been standing. You may notice this in subtle moments. A request that feels heavier than it should. An expectation that assumes you will say yes. A responsibility that somehow always lands on your side because you're capable. Because you're kind. Because you don't want to disappoint. But Libra, fairness is not proven by sacrifice alone. This is the moment where healing becomes practical. Not dramatic. Not confrontational. Just clear. You don't need to explain yourself endlessly. You don't need to justify your limits. You don't need to rescue anyone from the discomfort of hearing the truth. A boundary can sound simple. I need time. I can't take that on. This doesn't work for me anymore. And when you speak it calmly, without anger, without apology, something shifts. The people who are meant to meet you in balance adjust naturally. Those who relied on your silence may feel surprised, but surprise is not harm. What's being restored here is respect. For your time, for your energy, for your worth. You may worry briefly that setting limits will push people away, but the right connections don't collapse when you stand in your truth. They realign. Because boundaries don't end love, they give it structure. They allow relationships to breathe without resentment building underneath. And here's something quiet but powerful. When you stop overgiving, you create space for others to rise. You stop teaching people that your needs are optional. You stop training the world to lean on you unevenly. This is justice in its most human form. Not punishment. Not conflict. Balance. As you begin to hold your ground gently, you may notice a new steadiness in your body. A calm that doesn't come from keeping everyone happy, but from knowing you're no longer abandoning yourself. Let that feeling stay, because it prepares you for the next shift waiting ahead. One that doesn't ask you to do more, only to release what no longer belongs. And as you step into that release, the energy around you begins to change quietly, almost imperceptibly. That's where we're moving next. Libra, now everything begins to soften. Not because nothing matters anymore, but because what mattered too much is finally ready to be released. As the week leans toward its close, the energy around you changes texture. It grows quieter, deeper, more honest. The Scorpio moon doesn't skim the surface. It moves like water through stone. Patient, persistent, pulling up what's been buried, not to overwhelm you, but to clear the way. And then the new moon follows. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough light to mark an ending and make room for a beginning that doesn't need to announce itself yet. This is where closure becomes physical. You may feel it in small urges. A sudden need to clean, to open a window, to touch something familiar and realize it no longer belongs. That instinct is not random. Your space has been holding memory, emotion, versions of you that did what they needed to do to survive another season. But you're not in that season anymore. When you clear a room, you're not just moving objects. You're shifting energy. You're telling your nervous system that it's safe to exhale. You might pick up something old and feel a wave of emotion you didn't expect. Not because the item has power, but because you're ready to let go of the part of you that needed it. That's how cycles end, quietly. Not with confrontation. With recognition. Let the windows open. Let fresh air touch the corners of your life. Change the sheets, clear the surfaces, make space where clutter once stood. As you do, notice how your body responds. A lighter chest, a calmer breath, a sense of order returning without force. This is not about perfection. It's about permission. You're giving yourself permission to release what no longer has a role. Memories that taught you something but don't need to stay present. Attachments that once felt necessary but now feel heavy. And here's the quiet truth. What you release loses its grip on you, not all at once, but gently, gradually. That's the gift of this moment. Scorpio energy asks you to trust the process of shedding. The new moon asks you to trust what grows afterward. You don't have to know the shape of what's coming. You only have to create space for it. As you let go, you may notice something subtle shifting inside you. A calm confidence. A sense of alignment, not excitement. Stability. This is how rebirth actually feels. Grounded. Quiet. You are not erasing your past. You are honoring it by not letting it define you anymore. And as this cycle completes, as the energy settles into stillness, you begin to sense the next phase forming. Not as a demand, not as urgency, but as clarity. A clarity that asks one final question. Not about what you fear, but about how you choose to respond when truth stands in front of you. That question waits just ahead. And when you're ready, we'll meet it together. Libra, let's come back to the image that started all of this. The knock. Not as something dramatic, not as a threat waiting outside your door, but as a moment of truth arriving exactly when you are strong enough to meet it. Because divine justice never comes to frighten you. It comes to restore balance, where imbalance quietly lived for too long. It comes to return weight to the places that were overlooked, including you. This week is not asking you to brace yourself for impact. It's asking you to notice how much calmer you feel when things finally make sense. You've lived long enough to know the difference. Fear is loud, clarity is quiet, and what's moving through your life right now feels quiet in a way that steadies you. That knock can be answered in two ways, not by what you say, but by how you stand. You can open the door carrying old fear, the fear of conflict, the fear of disrupting peace, the fear of choosing yourself and being misunderstood, or you can open it grounded, breathing, centered in the knowing that truth does not take from you. It gives back. Libra, you were never meant to live in constant negotiation with yourself. You were never meant to carry everyone else's weight just to prove you are fair. Real balance does not ask you to disappear. It asks you to be present. And that presence changes everything. You may notice this week that situations resolve more simply than you expected. That conversations feel cleaner. That decisions feel lighter once you stop second-guessing your instincts. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you are no longer clouded by uncertainty. This isn't a crisis moment. It's a clarity moment. The kind that comes after you've done the inner work, after you've set the boundaries, after you've released what no longer belongs. Clarity doesn't rush you. It doesn't push. It invites you to move forward without dragging the past behind you. And freedom begins there. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that lets you sleep better, speak honestly, and trust yourself again. If you've been waiting for a sign that you're allowed to choose differently, consider this it. You are allowed to answer the door as the person you've become. Not the version of you that learned to stay silent to survive, but the version that knows balance includes your voice. So take a moment now. Feel where you're standing. Feel the steadiness underneath you. You don't need to know every step ahead. You only need to know how this moment feels in your body. If it feels calmer than fear, if it feels clearer than doubt, then you're already opening the door the right way. Stay with that feeling, and if this message found you at the exact right time, let it settle. Leave a quiet comment. Stay connected. Trust yourself enough to keep listening. Because this wasn't about prediction, it was about alignment. And Libra alignment is where your real freedom begins. Libra, before you go anywhere else today, I want you to notice something. The air feels different now. Quieter. Clearer. That's not because the world suddenly changed. It's because you did. When truth arrives, it doesn't always shake the ground. Sometimes it settles the dust. Sometimes it brings a calm you didn't realize you'd been missing until it was finally there. This week wasn't meant to overwhelm you. It was meant to return you to yourself, to remind you that balance is not something you chase. It's something you choose. And if this message found you, right here, right now, it's because a part of you was ready to stop doubting your own knowing. Libra, trust that quiet clarity. Trust the steadiness in your chest. Trust the version of you that no longer needs permission to stand in truth. You're not alone in this. There are others walking this same moment of realignment. Others learning that justice isn't punishment, it's peace restored. If something in these words touched you, don't rush past it. Leave a comment, even a simple one. It anchors the energy and lets this space stay alive. And if you feel called, like the video, subscribe, stay close. Because this journey doesn't end here. The next message is already forming. The next layer is already moving toward you. And it will meet you exactly when you're ready. Until then, hold your balance gently. Move forward with clarity. And remember this, Libra. When you choose truth, the universe always meets you halfway. We'll talk again soon.